get started. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Fran Lassiter. I am an associate professor here at Montgomery County Community College, and I'd like to thank you all for coming to our Creating Black Diasporic Poetry, a workshop. To tell you a little bit about this particular event in terms of how we are here and why we're here tonight, this was a grant that Amanda Leftwich and I were awarded, and for the most part, it's presented in hopes of engaging and encouraging much more interest in Black poetry. The grant itself was provided by the Library of America with funding from the National Endowment for the Humanities, the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation, and the Emerson Collective. Its principal objective is to engage participants in a multifaceted exploration of African American poetry, the perspectives it offers on American history and the struggle for racial justice, and the universality of its imaginative response to the personal experiences of Black Americans over 3 centuries. This grant is one of 49 that were awarded, and all of these grants are being shown and available throughout the United States. This is a free. Obviously, there's no cost for this, and because of the fact that we are in a pandemic, of course, this is all going to be done virtually. This is a public event. We not only had this event here tonight, but there was another event that we had back in October. That event was Black Experience in History and Memory, and it was a panel discussion that included Tony Davis, who is a member of our staff here at Montco, Sean Johnson, who is an assistant professor at Community College of Philadelphia, Aisha Lockridge, who is an associate professor at St. Joseph's University, and myself. And at that event, we discussed various themes in African American poetry. And as I mentioned before, that was in October. We also will have a final event, which will be taking place on the 17th, and we hope that you will join us at that event as well. For that event, we're going to be having 2 area poet laureates. One is Tripetta Mason, who is the poet laureate of Philadelphia County, and David Gaines, who is the poet laureate of Montgomery County. And these 2 individuals will be presenting their poetry and answering questions and engaging us in what we hope to be an incredibly lively discussion. Once again, that is on February the 17th at the exact same time, and I hope that you will be able to enjoy us. Without any further ado, I'll turn the program over to Amanda Leftwich.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amanda Leftwich. Today, we're going to work on some poetry together. The outline of the workshop is Express Yourself. Learn about Black poetic themes, styles, and techniques with artist and poet Sonsiris. This is our workshop host, and I'm going to hand it over to her. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Hey, good evening, everybody. I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you to the work of Amanda and Dr. Fran on the grant and for inviting me in. It's a short time that we have today to, produce work. And so I would like it to be as interactive as possible. Amanda, will we be able to see the other participants or no?
No.
Okay. Yeah, and so I'm Sonsiris Tamayo, and you can call me Sunny. I know we have another Sunny in the group. So my name is Sunny, and what I really want to showcase for you today is that poetry and the creation of poetry can be done really by any one of us at any time. And, we don't have to be so afraid of what we're creating and how it needs to be. So yeah, If you have any questions or anything, please put in the chat for us. What I'm hoping to do today is just get us into our bodies. So I'm Dominican American, so I'm a child of the diaspora. And with that comes a blended sense of identity. And sometimes my foot in multiple identities, which is a theme that does come up doing poetry. And it is something that will be very rich in exploration into how we can express ourselves. The other thing is that throughout my career, as a professional student, I like to call it, I wrote poetry. So in my undergrad, I studied psychology and English literature. And then throughout my graduate studies, they were more focused on theology, religion, and spirituality. But the beautiful thing about poetry that I want to encourage you is, even though I wasn't forward in my identity as poet at all times, I've always weaved into my writing, into my applications, into anything that I've done, I've always weaved into it poetry. So for instance, there's been times when let's say graduate studies, or I was doing doctoral work where I had maybe a 30-page paper, and that's a lot, right? With all the citations and this and that and the research required. But what I would do is sometimes I would speak to the professor, and I say, hey, is it okay if I can put poetry into this, or if I can insert some of my writings? And almost always it was a yes. Some of them did want to make sure that, that didn't take over what I was working on, which is very fair. You don't want to give your assignment to a student and then it becomes all right, this poetry. But they always allow me to be creative. And the reason I bring that up is because we can find ways to bring creativity, to bring creative expression, and to bring in some of that more emotive kind of work even into academic settings. Of course, ask your professor ahead of time, or whatever it is that you're working on. But I want to say that even if it's not a writing class, like in my class, it was theology or religion, I was able to bring in writing, bring in creativeness, because there was always an impulse in me to write. So I'm hoping that tonight we'll get to do some of that. And when we do, I want us in the chat to, if you have, let me know if you've written poem, if you have fears around that, if you feel like you might have a challenge with that, this is a perfect time to ask or to bring up, and then that way we can address those things. Because a lot of times when it comes to writing, or it comes to being creative, we might feel a fear, we might feel a block, we might feel like, well, if I'm not a poet, quote unquote, then I'm not able to, get in that zone, or that's not my lane. So I'll be looking here in the chat. Let's see. All right. I see we got a good number of people. So again, the best way that we'll be able to get the most out of it will be with some participation. I can tell you that a lot of times there is a lot of blocks with writing. We come across it when we're doing academic writing, when we are, even those of us that might feel we have more flow, everybody gets the writing block, right? And so one of the first poetry works of sorry, one of the first works we're going to look at tonight will be Lift Every Voice, because it is what, you know, in Black History Month we're doing. And it started off as a poem, and then the poem got set to music. And then it went from, you know, the words in James Weldon Johnson's brain into this expression that he wanted to have as a sort of celebration. And then it went from that into a spoken word. And then it went from that into, hey, let's put music to this. And then with each step, there's a different layering that's happening. And with each layering, something changes, and it hits us, the collective, differently. So how I would describe it is that my mom does not know how to teach me recipes. So I never really learned how to cook from recipe. I cook by what you will say was cooking from the elbow. You just kind of know. And the way that's how recipes were passed on to her in the Caribbean, right? And to me. And so sometimes I cannot describe to you the recipe. I have to like, okay, I need you to see what's going on here, because there's a different layering, right? So I'm putting in seasoning, right? There's marinating that's happening, goes into the fridge, comes back out. Now it's on the stove. Now it's in the pot, and there's a layering, a flavoring. As it is cooking, we're looking at it and we're adding a different layer of flavoring. We taste it, okay, we're gonna add a different layer. At each layer, there's a deepening that's happening, right? There's a synthesis that's happening with the ingredients. And at each step, we get to sort of adjust, and it'll hit us differently. So when I'm eating the stew this evening, let's say that I made, it's gonna taste delicious, right? But then when I save it in the fridge and I have it for leftovers tomorrow, it's also gonna taste different. And some people might say it tastes better, but for me, the leftovers is not necessarily better. It's just that the seasoning, the marinating process has changed it, right? There's some sort of alchemy that happens. So I love it on both occasions. And that's, I think, what we see with Lift Every Voice, is that there's this different layering that's happening from when we read it to when it's set to music, and then to how we experience it as a collective. So oftentimes, when we talk about Black poetic themes, there's many things that come up on a regular basis, right? So one of the things that often comes up, as we saw in Lift Every Voice, is a theme of freedom, a theme of struggles and overcoming the struggles, of going through the struggle, and of independence, right? Many times we have the theme of sort of putting to words, or creating a state where, let's say, a spoken word artist they can use their code switching in the poetry, where they're going back and forth to showcase the integration of identity, and sometimes also the isolation of one identity versus the other identity, and when to put it into action. So there is that layering of language, right? Not just what we're writing down, but how we write it, and who is the listener, who's the audience. So that's another theme that comes up. Also, when we even looking at Lift Every Voice, he starts off with like, okay, so we lift every voice to earth and heaven ring. But then as you go to the next stanza, and the next stanza or verse, it goes into religiosity, into spirituality. So another major theme will be, or is often, is Black religion, spirituality. Because in the United States, we have Christian roots, you will often see the theme of Christianity throughout Black poetry. However, even in that experience, many poets, many African Americans or children of the diaspora have explored other traditions. So you will also sometimes have a spirituality that talks about different gods, or where the ancestors are a real presence. And you will see that in the form of art, in the form of poetry, and in our writing. I know when I write, I've written sort of like tongue-in-cheek poetry where, you know, I've done a psalm, but then there's also times where I will refer to the Orishas, because the Orishas are, you know, a diasporic religion coming out of West Africa. And so those deities become, you know, anthropomorphized in the poetry, right? And so you will often see that state, or where we take our identity and kind of self-reflect through our self-reflection, because of where society has put us. That self-reflection through poetry can help to kind of lift us up, right? So increase our sovereignty, so that there is a sense of self-love. There's a sense of, well, I need to self-aggrandize because I've been pushed down so much. So then there's a call, and a very appropriate call, to see ourselves as creators, or see ourselves with the superpowers that we've been told we don't have, or are lacking, or never came from that place. Another major theme that you'll see in Black poetry will be that of the Black experience in a racist nation. And so oftentimes you'll hear, again, sort of that struggle, the freedom struggle, but it will also talks about the Black experience. I mean, I remember, you know, years back, right, with Trayvon Martin, and even most recent murders and death, it brought out a lot of grief and pain, and you know, we saw it in protest, but we also saw it in art. There was so much art that came out of this tragedy, because as humans, when we witnessed, we found that we needed to dig in. We had to create something. There was these emotions in us. And if we had the form of art, we would use different colors. And for those that had words, we looked for words to describe the grief. We looked for words to talk about that experience of the collective, but the experience of being a Black person in these United States of America, and with all of that history that entails. So that's also another theme, right, is history. So the history of African Americans, the children of that diaspora, is so much part of the experience that we lived out, because it's almost, right, it's like you just can't never forget. You might go about your day, but somebody's going to remind you somewhere. You're going to have that encounter that reminds you of your skin color, your race. You understand? And so because it's such a huge part of that experience, it also becomes part of the identity. And that's kind of where those things are intersecting, is identity and history, and then the lived experience. I know that for me, at times, like, let's say I was working on a paper and something just starts to bubble. And there's sort of like, I can almost feel the rhythm of the poem before the words come. And so as I'm writing, I just start kind of like feeling a certain rhythm in a cadence, or even a repetition, and that's how it comes. For some people call that the muse. I call it the spirit of my ancestors. I feel like sometimes when that energy or that that cadence or that rhythm is coming, I feel like that's when there's a message coming. That's when there's something I must share, and it could be with a small group, or even it's something that just needs to come up for ourselves. And so, you know, a major theme in Black poetry is, I think, the theme of like spirit and ancestors, and you know, who is our muse, because the way we view our muse could be very different with how others can view their muse. In the sense, for me and persons in my tradition, a lot of times the muse is the ancestor, is a spirituality that's trying to birth through, right? And so because we know we come from a place, a long lineage of strength and intelligence that is real, we could also encounter that in the word. So with all that being said, I wanted to quickly share, because I know the audience and our participants here are diverse, is Lift Every Voice, just like a short snippet of, because I will share with you the words here, and then I'm gonna share the music, and then that way you can see there's how it kind of transforms, and then how we experience that as a collective, because poetry has that power. When it has reached a large enough group of people, when it has reached a national stage, like with the inauguration poetry that we experienced recently, it has a power to change the collective. And so poetry connects us to something larger than ourselves once we share it. So when I was going through a grief period, I wrote a poem on grief. How I speak it, right? How I interpret it becomes different once I also share that with someone else that was going through grief. And in that way, we have like a kaleidoscope effect of poetry, which I think is so so much a reflection of Black culture, Black experiences, that we can take something and it can have a kaleidoscope effect. And so when we have one thing and now it's a myriad of images, a myriad of colors, and now the experience has become so rich and so profound that it just keeps on giving. And so here we are. Lift every voice and sing, to earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise, high as the listening skies. Let it resound as loud as a rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on to victory is won. And so I almost can't even read it to you without hearing the rendition that I heard of when I was in elementary school in the Bronx growing up in the 80s. They would sing, lift every voice and sing. So when we had the national anthem as a young child, because of my school and where I went to, we also sang lift every voice and sing. And that's also how it became part of my identity and collective at a different level. And so I'm gonna do a little screen share. There we go. There we are. Okay. So you see these are the words there, and then no, that wasn't it. We're gonna do this again. Okay. Thank you for your patience. Okay. Right. So And we'll just put it towards the beginning. Okay, and so with that is the energy, right? So the energy from the spoken to the sung. And the reason I wanted to share this is because in many of the traditions from the continent, West African countries and all over, the prayers themselves will be sung. And that's that the prayers themselves, because they're being sung, is coming out of poetry. It's coming out of a place of strength. And so I just want to highlight that this oral tradition that we have here is coming from a long lineage of a long lineage that is rich with creativity, with cadence, with rhythm, with alliteration, with sacred imaginings. And those are things that were passed on into our DNA. And so when we began to write and write poetry and talk in English in this land, we also brought forth that creativity, that cadence, and that rhythm. And so we have that within us, and I would like for us to, at some point, write soon. But I want to share with you something that I wrote, okay? And I'm just gonna look here. Did we get any questions in or any comments about blocks? Oh, okay, I'm seeing this. So I'm gonna give you some prompts and we're gonna do a screen, the stream of consciousness writing, okay? So the techniques, some of the techniques for writing poetry, I'll keep it very quick because we don't have much time, right? So you have free form where you're just writing like a stream of consciousness. Yeah, you can do a short type of poem like a haiku with just 3 lines, and the syllables are 5 in 1 line, 7, then 5. You can also rhyme, but you really don't have to rhyme. And then you could take a prompt. So I'm gonna give you a few prompts to write about, and then you can begin to write, and then we'll have time to share. So here's some prompts for you. I'll repeat the list so that you can have time to consider your option, okay? So we can do a stream of consciousness for writing a poem promoting self-love, or we can write a poem about healing Black lives, write a poem about your dream for the future of Black people, write a poem about for your inner child, okay? Write a poem addressing your elders, the moms, grandmothers, unnamed ancestors. Write a poem to your generation or to the future generation or the next generation of people. Or you can write a poem that is meant to ignite a conversation. Okay, so for self-love or healing Black lives, or a poem for the strong Black woman, a poem for the next generation, starting a conversation, promoting self-love and healing Black lives. And so as you begin to get your pen and paper and do that, I invite you to, drop your shoulders, release your tongue from the roof of your mouth, release the wrinkles in your forehead, and really relax your eyeballs and, wiggle your hands. Find a, feel free to move your back or if you're in your seat, and get into a place that's a little bit more comfortable for you. And then if you need a visualization, you can think about dropping an anchor. Like if you're in a boat or anything like that, you're just dropping your anchor, and it can kind of hold you in place while you sway on the waves. And then we'll give you time now. If you need to chat with me during that time, you can put it in the chat. Remember, stream of consciousness, everything that you write is just fine. The beautiful thing about poetry is that you can not follow any rules and it's still poetry. Yeah. We'll have 4 more minutes to continue to write in this stream of consciousness. I have one more minute. All right, come to a close on whatever sentence you may be working on. How you feeling with this? I appreciate any messages. What does anyone want to tell me about their experience in the chat? Were you able to flow? Did you get into a rhythm? Did something come up which surprised you in terms of theme? Sunny says it's always nice to let ideas flow without judging. That's why I always start with a stream of consciousness. It's because you can just go. You don't have to worry like, oh, how many verses? Am I rhyming? Am I not rhyming? You know, all of that. I think the best, one of the good places to start is stream of consciousness, because you could always go back and edit. You could always go back and break it up. If you want a repeating like verse, a stanza, you could always go back and insert it. Just let ideas flow, because sometimes we have no idea what is going to come up in the stream of consciousness. We might start thinking about, you know, snow, and then end up thinking about something completely different in what we're writing. So I'm glad that we were able to let ideas flow. We do have a few more minutes, so let's do 3 minutes.
Would it be okay if I shared my poem?
Yes, I would love that.
It's a haiku. And I sort of took your advice about what we were feeling. So here it goes. When I woke this morning, I felt the pain in my joints. I need yoga fast.
Ah. I love it. I love it. And I'm sure a lot of yoga IG accounts will love that too. Yes, being in our feeling what does our skin feel like? What when I ate this piece of mango, have you ever had a juicy piece of mango? You could write so much poetry from that. I've written about eating plátanos. Anybody know the yellow plantains when they sweet? I've written about that, or just putting lotion on my body. How does it feel to take that time out with self-care? And, you know, it does become a little, in that sense, it became a little sensual, but the idea was taking this ritual, this self-care time for ourselves. So thank you, Fran, for sharing, because sometimes, like me, I had knee surgery, the joints are like, we need yoga. We need yoga, sis. And since you share a haiku, I do have a haiku somewhere here. I feel like the time is going way too quickly. Oh, it's called Winter, right? We're in winter. Splintered trees stand bare, haunted by winter's death grip. Under seas burst life. Okay, so that's another haiku. And you know, I wrote a poem that I'll just share with you. And it's called Start from the Ground You Know, because this is a poem for us when we are like, I'm having writer's block, okay? Start right now, let it all go, let it all out. Start right now, never mind the voices, never mind the doubts. Start right now, Start with what you know, let it all flow. Start from within and not from without. Come back to the ins and outs. Start from the ground you know, start from the inner. Start from the feelings you know. Start, my friend, for I'm here to guide you. I'm here to shut out the noise. Start because your voice is important. Never mind the naysayers, never mind the doubts. Start the writing. Let go of your fears. Your words won't run out. Start and let go, my friend. Your words vibrate with colors. Your words sing of hurts and hopes. Start the writing, my friend. I've been waiting only for you to pick me up and let the ink free. Start the writing. Do it for only you. Let go of outcomes and results. Start close in. Only you can say it like you can. Start with the ground you know. Start with the highs and lows. Start fast or start slow. Start the writing, my friend. You are a poet, lover, warrior, and your words resonate. Start the writing. Start. Don't think, it will flow. Start and unleash the rivers within. Start and plant a seed, and start and build a mountain. Start your journey, follow your path, and deny yourself no more. Start the writing, my friend. And thank you for listening to that. That was a poem that I wrote to myself about writing when I was having writer's block, and I didn't know what to write about. So I started a stream of consciousness where I said, just start right now. And then out of that came this whole poem that I hope is also inspiration to you, that even when we think there's no words, words don't come, they will come. They will come. And, you know, don't judge yourself, and, you know, really lean into the creativity that is the Black experience, you know. And for those that are a variety of backgrounds, we all come from Mama Africa, and we all have that creativity within us, you know. So lean into that jazz that we do, like is the actual genre, right? It came out of that Black experience, that the ability to flow and to adapt. If you've been through any struggle or challenge this year, okay? Yes, place any questions for me here. If you have been through any challenge, any struggle this year, especially with COVID, right? And you've been able to pivot, adapt, you are poetry in motion, because that ability to adapt, to become aware, is that poetic experience. So if you were able to do that in your outside life, you will be able to sit and write. Poetry is therapeutic as well. So the most powerful poetry I've ever written was when I was feeling an overwhelming sense of grief or joy, or just something that was very heightened, and it provided healing. So I'm hoping that you leave here with that, maybe this can be a therapeutic thing for me to attempt to do as we continue in a state of emergency with the pandemic that's currently happening. So I'm happy to take any questions that are coming up. Creative writing. What's the best way to?
I can read the question.
Oh,
you can answer
yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So have you published a poem at all? If possible, it might be good for my creative writing class to read it. If not, that's fine. I really loved it. Great job.
Oh, have I published this particular poem? Not in any particular book or anthology, but I'm happy to share it with my name on it, with the class, and I could do that via Amanda.
And then what is the best way to develop confidence in your written voice?
Read, and write. So the best way to have confidence in writing papers or writing is to actually read a lot, so that even if we're not breaking down everything we're reading, our brain is taking in the information about sentence structure, voice, what we like, what we don't like. All of that is really happening almost at a subconscious level. So when you want to write, you got to read books, read poetry, read different poets from different all over the world, different cultures, anything like that. You can read the greats, you can read the obscure, you can read the new modern poetry, you can read religious poetry, read and then write. The more I do my stream of consciousness, the more I write, the more I know something will come, it's gonna show up, and the words will be okay. And the more we do that, the more we'll program our brain to have confidence. Oh, I can do this. I know when I sit down, I will be able to do this. I know when I have to do public speaking, right? Like now, I know it will come. So even if we get the writer's blocks or we have the jitters, you know, because of a public speaking or anything of that nature, the way to do it is one step at a time. Just like anything else, is write, read, write, and just come back to letting it be a little fun. Like the one of the Psalms, when I wrote a Psalm in seminary school, it was kind of like a tongue-in-cheek Psalm to God. And so I made it kind of funny. So it's okay sometimes even to allow yourself to kind of have fun with the experience and make a joke in your writing if you want to. It will help you kind of release that energy, and then you can get into where you need to go to.
Great. I have another question. Do you have a favorite poet and why?
Oh gosh, there's so many. I think Maya Angelou, just because when I was a little girl, you know, there wasn't the internet, and I went to the library, and for some reason I was really attracted to her books and to her autobiography, and also then her poetry. And what I found was that as a little girl and having gone through some of the similar experiences that she went through, that her poetry really resonated at a deep place. So for instance, you have Phenomenal Woman. I remember the first time reading it, I was reading it kind of like, phenomenal woman, you know, and it was like that because that's how I felt. But I knew there was something to the words. As I continued to read and read, then I could get into a sassy mode, like, you know, phenomenal woman, that's me, right? But it took to progression. So for me, I'm struck by that particular poet because of emotion. And then there's a younger writer, and I'm forgetting her name, but she wrote Salt, is this book of poetry, and I'll type it in there in a minute. And I love her poetry because they go really deep, but they're kind of short most of the time. And it's like, wow, she just blew my mind. Just in a few sentences, not even haiku form, but just in a few sentences, pow. Because sometimes I'm a reader, I'm a writer, I like to talk, as you can tell. And sometimes when something is very focused and short, it'll grab my attention, you know, much faster. And that was about my favorite poet.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think about the future of poetry? Where do you see it going? How do you see it developing?
Yeah, so with that, I think, you know, it's cliche, right? The world's our oyster, but I feel like, I think it's gonna go, I think it might start to shift, right? A lot of the poetry that we've heard so much from had to do with so much resistance and liberation and struggle and pain. And I feel like that's gonna shift to more joy again, to more of looking to hope and to experiences of, yeah, I already said it, joy. I feel like because of the state of where we in, it affects all of who we are, including our creative voice. It's been in such a place of struggle and chaos. And I feel that as the times are changing, we're online more, people are meditating more, they're doing more yoga, people are like journaling more and doing more self-care and working on boundaries, that I feel as we go back into that incubator, it will incubate more poetry and more creativity that's coming from a place that feels a little bit more healed.
Great. Is there anything else you would like to share with the audience before we sign off? We have a few more minutes.
Yeah, there's so much that that I won't be able to share with you. Oh, here we are.
So the question is
Yes.
for the audience, does visual art ever inspire your process? Do you see any of the poems you write like a story unfolding as you tell it?
Absolutely. I see visuals a lot because I'm a visual person. I also like to paint, and I feel it coming sometimes through colors, or it's just a feeling. And so I do, when I'm writing, I find myself describing those things. So for instance, I like to describe the visual, the taste. That's why going to our senses is always perfect. You can start talking about, being in the shower. How does that feel? Your limbs start to feel better. You could talk about anything, drinking a hot, drinking actually a ice cold iced tea in the middle of the summer. We all kind of start to go into that because we know what that feels like, right? So connecting to the visual, connecting to story is definitely helpful to me. And in the case of that one poem I shared, the story was I was having a writer's block and I talked myself, and then the story unfolded to, being able to have river of flow of creativity come. So yeah, and many times visual art will either inspire it, or out of my words, I'll get a mental image that might go along with that. It could be a painting or a story.
Can I follow up on that? You did say earlier, if I'm not mistaken, that you paint,
Yeah.
correct? Is
Mhm.
there any particular style, or is there any
Aha.
particular thing that inspires you to paint?
Well, interesting enough, my style of painting is completely like my style of writing. A stream of is in the writing we call it stream of consciousness, and then the technique that I use and learn is called spontaneous expression. And so when I do healing or writing with, let's say, my coaching clients, or I do painting and with them, the technique I use is spontaneous expression, meaning that if we'll just lay out all the different color paints. I lay out all the different color paints, and then I have all the different paintbrushes, big, small, little, fat handles, skinny handles. And then the technique is I look at the brush, I pick up the one that calls my attention. I don't overthink it. Oh, I want to feel the fat one right now with the big brush. Then I just look at the colors. It might be 20. You know what? The purple one sticks out. And then I'll just go and I'll start painting. I do not have a concept in my mind. I don't have an idea or anything. And this technique works especially for healing. So if I use it with someone and they're getting stuck, it'll be my job to kind of help them move on from that. So I've had images come out of it, but not because I said, oh, I want to paint a tree. The tree came out of my painting through the colors, through the shapes. The mermaids came out of my painting through the colors and the shapes that I originally chose. So I had not thought about it, but yes, my painting and my writing actually has the same technique. Because I'm such an overthinker, I stress out. I'm a type A, like I want to have 100 on the test. I want to get everything right. And so because I know my mind is that way, these techniques move me away from that, so my creative energy flows. So I found that that's what's helpful to me, because my own personality is overthinking type A. I'm like, I just have to like not think about any rules and just let the colors emerge, let the words come. I don't know if anybody identifies with that. Yes, Sunny, yes. Many of us are, because this society trains us a lot to, you have to have this rule, man, and this and that. And, there's so many rules about everything, and we can go into that with poetry too, because there are other rules sometimes. And so to move away from that societal pressure of rules and how everything has to be, I favor free flowing yoga at home. When I do my yoga, I favor like, going into where my body is feeling it. When I do public speaking or preaching, I'll have an outline for myself. I'm not a manuscript writer. That doesn't work for me. I know it works for many people, but in the spirit of my ancestors, I kind of just go and meet people where they're at and kind of go with the flow. Otherwise, I would never get on camera or write or share.
Well, Sonsiris, I cannot thank you enough for your presentation tonight. I think that all of us have hopefully gained a little bit more about how to go about writing poetry that we can enjoy, not just a matter of performing it for someone else, but for our own pleasures. Amanda, you want to add anything to this?
No, this was great. Thank you so much. We hope that you learned something and that you'll come back for our next event on the 17th. So we just hope to see you then. And thank you for coming out.
Thank you for
Good night,
having
everybody.
me. Thank you for participating. All right.
Good night, everybody. Be safe.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Another Q&A.
Oh, no, we stay.
Someone just said, thank you for the wonderful journey.